Okay, welcome to lesson 3, the frames. So I'm going to break this lesson into 2 parts just because it is quite long and there are tasks to do with each of these. And I would like you to make sure you're completing each of these tasks and bring them in to show me, please. So in this 2 lessons, 3A and 3B, we're going to look at the frames. There are 4 frames, so sometimes it's called the 4 frames, and essentially they provide a different perspective or vantage point from which we can consider an artwork and the different ideas that it represents. One way to think about the frames is that each frame acts like a lens. And so you might sort of think of the analogy of a camera, and you're looking at an artwork and then you're applying a certain lens, and through that lens you're viewing the artwork in a very specific way. The frames work in conjunction with the conceptual framework, so it's really important to recognize that they overlap like a giant Venn diagram. And as we work through each example and I take you through each of the 4 frames, I will apply the frame to the conceptual framework. So I'll invite you to think about how that frame you can use to look at or think about or talk about an artwork, the artist, the audience, and the world. And of course, the frames also apply to your own art practice. So you can use these to think about your own art making through the same lenses. And there are a couple of practical activities in here as well, where it asks you to apply this frame to your artwork. So as we go along, you need to take notes. Obviously, you can pause and rewind at any time. I recommend that you get 1 to 2 pages in your visual diary and create like a table. So divide your page into 4 and create a heading for each frame, or you can do a page for each one. It's up to you depending on how much you like to write, and take notes as you follow through the video. So the subjective frame, we'll start here because it's really the first frame that anyone ever uses to respond to artworks, and it's pretty much one of the easiest ones. So these are the notes that you want to be writing down. So you can summarize these and simplify them, but essentially the subjective frame is thinking about artwork from a subjective point of view. So when we talk about the subjective frame, we're thinking about the way that feelings, emotions, imagination, and personal experiences are understood and communicated in visual arts, both by the artist and how you as the viewer respond using your own feelings, emotions, etc. So through the subjective frame, art is understood as a way to explore and represent individual experiences of the world. So we can consider through a subjective frame how the artist is representing their understanding of something or their experience of something. And we can consider that artists make artworks inspired by their imagination, memories, identity, and relationships. So when we're responding to artwork through this frame, we're really having an emotional response. We're thinking about how we react emotionally based on our own experiences. And when we're making art, we're thinking about how we create work related to our own experiences or feelings. If we apply the subjective frame to the conceptual framework, here is how that might look. So the artist, through the subjective frame, the artist is seen as an individual whose artistic intentions are shaped by their imagination, emotions, and or personal experiences. The artwork itself, so through the subjective frame, artworks are interpreted as emotional expressions and or reminders of personal memories and experiences and the subconscious and fantasy. Through the subjective frame, audiences interpret the meaning and value of art in relation to personal associations and connections that can be made. And then through the subjective frame, the personal experiences, memory, the subconscious, and the imagination are sources of ideas. The artist's subjective world informs the artist and artwork. So you can see how we apply that frame to each of those 4 domains, and how essentially it all comes back to feelings and experiences. And this is very much about personal response. So if you're looking at an artwork, here are the questions that you would ask using the subjective frame and also the conceptual framework. So first of all, you would ask how the artist's personal experiences, ideas, and or events have informed this artwork. We might ask, how have the imagination, fantasies, or dreams informed the artwork? And we might ask, does the artist see art making as a way of exploring their emotions? Now, obviously, you'd need to do a bit of research about the artist to figure that out. And you'd need to know why they're exploring those certain experiences or those emotions or those memories. And that's something that you might consider doing with your case study artist, Jean. We know he draws on his culture. Does he draw on personal experience? Does he draw on fantasies, imagination, or dreams? When you look at the artwork as an isolated entity, through the subjective frame, it's all about your personal response. So the questions you would ask through the subjective frame, looking at an artwork, is how do you relate to this artwork? How do you respond to this artwork? How does it make you feel? Does it remind you of your own experiences or feelings? And you might think about how the artist has used a visual language to convey personal experiences, memories, or events. Through the subjective frame, we might look at broader audiences beyond your personal self. So how have audiences personally connected with this artwork and how have they responded? So in order to find that kind of information out, you really need to be looking at what's been said or written about an artwork. What kind of articles are there? Was there criticism? Was it really controversial? And there's like a lot of commentary on the internet and online for contemporary works. So, we're looking at people's personal responses. We might also consider what personal associations audiences might make with this work. And that one thing to do is to consider why different audiences might respond in very different ways to other audiences. And I think we kind of talked about that or touched on that briefly with the Patricia Piccinini work with the pig person thing. And one of the things I asked you to consider was how, I think I said a vegan audience might respond to this work differently to someone who had a scientific background, for example. And then through the subjective frame, looking at the world agent, how does the artwork explore shared human experiences? And so when we're thinking about human experience, we're really thinking about things like the human condition. I don't know if that's a concept that you've done in English or perhaps in psychology, but the human condition is really considering what it is to be human and the shared experiences and emotions that are universal. So understanding what love is a universal condition. Understanding what it is to feel lonely is a universal condition. And so those kinds of things make us human. They're the ties that connect all of humanity. So when you look at the artwork from the world vantage point, does this artwork explore something that is going to be universally recognized by any audience? And how is the artwork a response to the world of the artist? So we might go, what kind of world is being depicted here? And is it a response to something that is happening in the artist's life or an experience that they've had? So we're going to take a look at an example. You'll be familiar with this work, I hope, because it's pretty famous. This is Edvard Munch, Edvard Munch, The Scream. Painted in 1893. This version is tempera paint and crayon on cardboard. He painted this same painting, I think at least 20 times, and they're all slightly different. He also turns it into a woodcut print. So there are many, many versions of this painting. He obviously had a real need to kind of resolve this image. But I want to read to you what was written by Munch about this and some text that was written by an art gallery. So the artist himself, Munch, Munch. I can never remember how to say his name. Let's call him Munch. So he said, for as long as I can remember, I have suffered from a deep feeling of anxiety, which I have tried to express in my art. And he also wrote, I was walking along the road with two friends. The sun was setting. I felt a wave of sadness. The sky suddenly turned blood red. I stopped, leaned against the fence, tired to death, looked out over the flaming clouds like blood and swords, the blue-black fjord and the city. My friends walked on. I stood there quaking with angst, and I felt as though a vast, endless scream had passed through nature. So that was his diary entry about the scream, which was, I said it was written by a gallery, but it was actually just published on MoMA. Great place for you to be looking at artworks. MoMA is the Museum of Modern Art in America. So there's the artist's own words. So we can see, we can start to see that this is about a personal experience and a personal feeling. So obviously this is a work that's very easy to look at through the subjective frame. So the scream is a powerful image that describes an intense emotional experience. Your task is referring to the artwork and text to learn about the scream and then complete the following activities. I said that really poorly, but basically the text that I just read to you on the previous slide is the information. Look at an image of the artwork, and here's what you need to do. So what kind of emotion do you think the figure is experiencing? There we go. Paste a copy of the image in your visual diary. So it's really important when we're going through and looking at these examples that you're actually printing these out and sticking them in your visual diary. It's all evidence of you doing the work. If you prefer to type, you are more than welcome to. So then you can copy the image into a Word doc and you can type your notes next to it. That's completely fine. And then print that out and stick it in your visual diary, or print the image, stick it in and write next to it. I don't mind which method you choose, but I want to see the evidence of you doing the work. If you need help with printing, and I know you've got a printer, but if you need help with printing, let me know. Just flick me an email and say, can you please print this picture, this picture, this picture, and I will print them for you. So stick a copy in your visual diary and annotate, specifically noting how the artist has used color, line, shape, and distortion or manipulation to communicate that emotion. So the emotion that you think the figure is experiencing. So we're kind of linking that personal feeling with the structural frame, which we'll get to in a minute, and thinking about the choices the artist has made to communicate that to the viewer. Go back and reread Edvard Munch's diary entry that he wrote about the scream on the previous slide, which is sometimes displayed alongside the artwork when it's exhibited. And I want you to think about and answer this. How does this poem help audiences understand the meaning of the artwork? One paragraph is sufficient. All right, once you've completed that, come back for the next bit. Example 2. This is a sculpture in bronze by Louise Bourgeois. If you are interested in contemporary weird art that is very feminist and also just very strange, Louise Bourgeois is a really good artist to look at. This sculpture is called Maman. It was made in 1999 and this version was cast in 2001. So it's bronze, marble and stainless steel, and it's pretty big, 895 centimeters by 980 by 1160. So that's like 8.9 by 10 meters by 11 meters. So I wish there was a person in the picture so you could get a sense of its scale. So the first thing I want you to do is respond personally. So viewing this sculpture, write down your immediate emotive response. And this can just be dot points, but what does it make you feel? Make sure you're printing an image of that, stick it in your visual diary as well. Or if you don't want to do that, draw a quick sketch of it. So what does this work make you feel? What is your first impression of the artwork? Before you do any research, don't go and read about it, just respond to the artwork. What does it make you think of? What does it remind you of? And how do you think audiences might react seeing this, especially in its environment? So not just a picture of it as it is here, but imagine that you're seeing this and we can see the building next to it. So we get a sense of its scale. How do you think audiences might feel seeing this? So go away and do that and then come back to the next slide. Okay, so here is some text taken from the Guggenheim Museum. Like a creature escaped from a dream or a larger-than-life embodiment of a secret childhood fear, the giant spider Maman, 1999, casts a powerful physical and psychological shadow. Over 30 feet high, the mammoth sculpture is one of the most ambitious undertakings in the long career of Louise Bourgeois. Over a vast oeuvre spanning more than 60 years, Bourgeois plumbed the depths of human emotion further and more passionately than perhaps any other artist of her time. In its evocation of the psyche, her work is both universal and deeply personal, with frequent explicit reference to painful childhood memories of an unfaithful father and a loving but complicit mother. Now, the next slide is a link to a video. I can't play the video in this presentation, and so I'm going to put a link to it in the description under the video. And I'm going to put this whole PowerPoint up on I'll put on OneNote. It'll be too big to go and connect, so it'll be up on OneNote, and you can access the video through there as well. But otherwise, I'll give you the link. So go and watch that video, then come back to this one. There's the video. It's on YouTube. It's about 5 minutes long. Okay, so here's what I want you to do with that one. First of all, I want you to look up the meaning of the title Maman. Now, if you speak French, you'll already know what it means, but if you don't, you might not know what that word means. I want you to write the English translation, and then I want you to think, does this change your understanding of the work? So thinking about the personal response you had initially, knowing what it is titled, how does this change your understanding of the work? Second, what spider-like qualities does the artist associate with the person she made this artwork about? Are these qualities you would usually associate with a spider? Now, the information for that's going to come from the video, so if you didn't watch it, go back and watch it. So, applying art making in the subjective frame. So here is how we think about our own art practice through this subjective frame. So, and I want you to apply this to your current body of work. Write down 5 different emotions and brainstorm ways they could be represented visually, including through facial expression and body language. Consider the ways that the choices you make about the visual language, for example, color, line, tone, shape, composition, signs and symbols, can more effectively convey emotion and mood to an audience. So that's step 1. So start by writing down 5 different emotions, ways you could represent them visually. Now, you don't need to necessarily think about how you would do that in clay. You can think about how you would do it in paint or in drawing or whatever. But then the second step is apply this to your proposed work. Now, you've got an idea in place. I know you're in the process of changing that idea, but thinking about the basic concept of your work, apply this same thing to your work. What emotion are you trying to convey? If you had to nut it all out into one word of one feeling that you're trying to communicate, identify what that is, and then think about what choices are you making to help communicate these. And I want you to make notes or drawings to explore this further. So you might do a new sketch of your proposed idea, your design, and you might identify specific techniques, materials, elements or principles that you're using that are deliberately constructed to communicate that feeling. Now, I know I said this was going to be a 2-part video, but because it's been recording now for 20 minutes, I'm going to make this a 4-part video. I'm going to do each of the 4 frames as a separate video and upload them just so my computer doesn't crash and burn. Also, because I've given you tasks to do, that's enough for one day. And I would like you to complete the tasks for the subjective frame before next week. Enjoy, and I will see you in class. Ciao.